Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. They offer a wide selection of high-quality plants, landscaping materials, and home decor. They do amazing high-quality work and can help you transform your indoor and outdoor living spaces into something beautiful. So stop by Casey's Outdoor Solutions today and let them know you appreciate their support for Rock Solid Radio. Visit Casey's today at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. This is Merrill Hutchinson, being joined by my beautiful wife, Linda Hutchinson. How are you, Linda?
Oh, thanks, honey, but I don't feel very beautiful today.
Why not?
Because I feel like I have a bad hair day or something.
I won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, honey. That's up to you and the other ladies out there to determine.
And guys don't
see. That's the beauty of being a man. Like, I don't even know if a comb hit my hair today. It sticks out the way it sticks out.
And actually, that's exactly why I brought that up, because I really, it's just an easy example of our whole topic today.
Okay, so you're using it as a lead-in.
Yes,
I got you.
I am, because it's all about perspective, right? Whether or not you even noticed that I was having a bad hair day, and whether or not you even care.
You guys don't know this, but sometimes before we get ready to record, Linda will say, "No, don't do it yet," and then she'll take her phone out and she'll be like, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "There's like this little piece of hair that keeps sticking out, and I saw it in last week's show." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, okay."
Now you're going to have everybody staring at the little piece of hair.
Well,
now
you
I'm all
pointed
conscious.
it out.
Yeah. Anyway, joking aside, though.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what we're talking about: perspective and how people can view things from totally different angles. And we're going to ask you to really open up your mind and your heart today about maybe kind of doing a little bit of shifting of your mind and your thought process, and really your perspective of how you look at things the way you do.
I want to use a word in here too, hon, with the idea of, because it's been a cultural word that's come up more strongly probably in the last 5 years than I can ever remember it, but people get locked in on a narrative, a narrative like how they believe something ought to be. And then once they lock in on it, whether it's your Christian faith is your narrative, or whether it's, your narrative is bigger
Politics.
Government or smaller government or whatever your narrative is, it then has to season every single thing you do, even if it contaminates somebody else's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that whole idea of today, like opening up your mind and seeing, well, how much is that?
Yeah.
How much am I doing that? Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's not a place for it. We're going to get into some of that. But I think sometimes we don't even realize that we are kind of locked in on a narrative, and it's because it's my narrative,
Yes.
it must be right.
Must be right. So I'm going to ask you to really reflect on a question today that we're going to be talking about through the show, and that is, why does the things that bother you so much bother you? In other words, what's behind the anger and the resentment and the irritation that you have towards something? Maybe it's a political party, maybe it's, or someone, whether it be your boss, your neighbor, your spouse, your children. I really want you to reflect on that. Like, why is that upsetting me? What is it in me that's angry and getting irritated by what's happening or what I'm reading or seeing or doing? And so, could it be that you could feel differently or respond differently if you were willing to look at it from a different perspective? And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, man. So you got my brain all fired up now, going down different roads. But before I do that, I better thank people that are supporting us. Let us thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions, along with Maxwell Construction, for coming alongside of Rock Solid Radio and supporting the work that we do and the messages that we put out, the narrative that we put out. And so we do believe in our narrative, but we also do not want to be locked down and exclude people who we love and we want to bring along, and we believe that it's not our narrative as much as it's the Word of God, and we believe that is worth standing working on. But I think we can do that in some pretty nasty ways. But so we want to thank Casey's and Maxwell for just giving us the opportunity to be able to have these kinds of talks. Not necessarily always coming up with the answer, but maybe some response to it. How about some announcements?
Yeah. So before,
oh my gosh, here we go. We're back into the pumpkin. People, you got to see this.
No, I mean, I looked all over for my fall mug, and it says start each day with a thankful heart, and it's like a little pumpkin color. But what's so funny is, I really had to search for it. It was kind of buried back in the cabinet.
I wonder how that happened.
I almost dug out the one that says world's greatest grandpa. And I thought, that would give me
now we'd be talking right
That's
there.
A different perspective, right? But, sometimes even my mugs, I have to kind of like gear my thoughts and minds toward what it is that I want to think and I want to focus on, right? My perspective. So I like my thankful heart.
So I'm more like a uniform guy, right? Like once I get something that fits, it's a year-rounder. If you've ever noticed, pretty much, I'd say 85% of the time you've seen this mug.
It's your Navy mug.
It's my Navy mug. It's my uniform.
Support the Navy going
Support
on.
the Navy. Support our sons. There's a whole other tangent I'm going on right
don't go
there.
on a tangent.
Yeah.
But before we do, we want to mention a few things. One is our last week of Rock Solid Families going to be for Families Rock is going to be this coming Wednesday. If you're listening to this in the week that it's posted, the last Wednesday in September of 2022.
September 28th.
We are going to be at East Central High School for kids and their friends. And this is a really important one. It's really kind of our first counseling session that I use a lot with the girls that walk in my door, whether they be preteens, teenagers, even young adults. And so we're going to be talking about how to help our kids navigate in their friendships and relationships. And so we would love for you to attend. And, some parents had even asked, can I bring my kids? That's fine. If they could sit through an hour or so, an hour and a half, then we'd be glad to have them join us because we're going to be talking about what do we look for? How do we be a good friend? And what do we want in our friendships?
Yeah. We also just want to always let our listeners and viewers out there realize that for our day job, Linda and I, we operate Rock Solid Families, which is a marriage and family coaching ministry. And our dealing is faith, family, fitness. And so we oftentimes are dealing with marriages or family situations where people get stuck and they'll get stuck in some of these narratives and some of these, and they will lock in, right? I mean, and to the point of divorce, to the point of
hopelessness.
Where estrangement within families and you're like, oh my gosh. And so if we can help you if something we talk about today prompts some thoughts in your mind, if we can help you, reach out, okay? 812-576-7625. Also, if you're just wondering, go to our website, rocksolidfamilies.org. And I mean, we have, over 200 shows now in Rock Solid Radio and about 164, I think we just put out on Strong Dads, which that reminds me, okay? The last show we just did on Strong Dads was with special guest Michael Ashford. And Michael, I got to know Michael because he was a fitness guy, but he was also a journalist. And he got really frustrated. He got frustrated with every time he turned on a TV, that there was just so much divisiveness, all this just arguing and stuff. And then at the time of the Trump-Biden election, he was watching those debates and watching the behavior of the two men who were supposed to be leaders and how they were actually going about it. And it was just, to him, it was like, this is just disgusting on both parts.
Yeah.
And he's a Christian man and strong Christian in his faith. But he said, I have to do something different in my work because I think my work needs to be more with, as a journalist, learning how to ask questions well and listen to people. And he was
perspective.
He was trained in listening as a journalist, which not all journalists do. Oftentimes journalists, and this is one of the big accusations that comes to the press, is that they do things with a narrative, and that gets them in trouble. And that's why people don't trust many journalists these days or the media. But Michael was a guest of ours on Strong Dads to say, okay, he's calling it out, and now how he is going about addressing it and he has a podcast called The Follow-Up Question. Okay. The follow-up question. In other words, when you are in a level of disagreement or not exactly on the same page, what do you do next? Do you just stay angry and decide to never talk to the person? Or what
Which is what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah. And so that's where the follow-up question comes in. So anyway, that's episode 164 on Strong Dads. And we'll actually be touching on some of that today just because he brought up very good points.
Yeah. I love that, hon. And I'm so thankful that you brought that up. I have worked with a lot of couples and families and individuals who have lost hope. And one in particular, I asked on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how much do you want to be here? How loved and safe and secure and fulfilled are you? And this person said a 0. And to me, that's suicidal. That's the level of just despair. And this perspective was so skewed by just the pain that she was under and the pressure she was feeling. And so, man, she had just no ability to really see outside of her world. And through a couple weeks, hon, of really some intentional perspective shifting for her, she came back in my office and she was at an 8. And I said, what's the difference? And she says, I took my eyes off of my pain and my struggles and I put them on the Lord. And it was amazing in a matter of just weeks how we could shift. Her situation, by the way, has not changed a bit. Yep. She's still in a place of despair with pain and with situations in her family. And so, but my point is that sometimes it's our perspective. It's really, do we spend more time in our everyday lives reflecting on why we're feeling the way we're feeling? Or are we really just spending the time rebuking and condemning and judging how others are feeling and thinking? And so really, we're really talking about reflecting versus rebuking. Are we really spending some time to kind of dig deep and to kind of break through, why are we feeling the way we're feeling? Is it someone else's fault really? Or is it the way things are going in our lives or whatever? So I really want us to talk about that today.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned something that I talk about frequently, especially when I'm working with men. There's only two, obviously this is just kind of some talking point, but there's only two kinds of old men: happy old men and grumpy old men. And you get to that age where that's where you start to run into people, and they'll have a tone to them. And, this is a guy that everything's gone wrong for him. He hates the government. He hates the church. He hates the neighborhood. He's a guy that when the kids hit the ball in his front yard, he goes out and he gets the ball and he steals it. And then he looks at the kids
what was that, Sandlot, that old man did that? Yeah.
And so, there's that man. And then there is the man who sees the sunshine. He expresses kind of the beauty in what he sees in life. He's pleasant to be around. And here's kind of the interesting part about that. If you went back through both of their lives, you'd see they both have bankruptcies in their world. They both have divorces in their world. They both have family and illness and all these other troubles that can come into play. And so nobody owns the market on life troubles, right? They both have life troubles, but one makes a very conscious decision to see the good perspective.
Yeah.
And one not so much.
Yeah. So many of you have probably heard of C.S. Lewis, who was a Christian author who's known for some amazing works like Mere Christianity, the Screwtape Letters. Probably his most famous is the Chronicles of Narnia, which was made out into a movie series. But anyway, he wrote a lesser known book called Miserable Offenders. And there's a quote in here that I think is really powerful. And it says, "Those who do not think about their own sins make up for it by thinking incessantly about the sins of others." And so do you and I do that? Are we spending more time obsessing and focusing on what others are doing or how they're not doing for us, what they're not doing, instead of really looking at some introspection of okay, what's in me that's getting all stirred up by something that someone else is doing or saying?
And one of the things that we know with bullies, bullies are always, bullies and those who are bullied, the victim, actually have very much in common,
Yeah.
and that is they both have some significant weaknesses and insecurities, and they don't quite know how to cover them in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm. And the commonality is also the dysfunction and the chaos that they grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them came up from very similar kind of homes.
Right. There's problems in the background. So that idea here is then people act out and hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
We say that all the time, hurt people. Mm-hmm. And so you have some questions here, hon, about the idea of some things that we need to think about.
Yeah.
And as I read through this, it makes me wonder like how stuff sometimes gets stuck in my head, right? Like I hold on to it as if somehow it is my right and privilege to hold on to it. Like, I want to be angry, but so why does it bother me so much? What's truly behind my anger or frustration with things or people? What is triggering me? And so I wrote a little message on our workout board the other day. Is there somebody that you don't like being around? And then I asked why. Because we all have that person or people, okay, whatever, that you're like, oh, anyone but him. Oh, no. And if you drill down for a little bit, you'll start to name things about that person that trigger you.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, right? If they're abusive or whatever, those kind of things. But the question is like, well, what is it that they're triggering? Do you have something that you're easily offended by, and that person happens to be the guy who trips it?
Yeah. Well, when we talked about it in How We Love weeks ago, when we talked about the impaired love styles, we talked about really that the way we treat other people, the way we love, a lot of times comes from the way we were loved and the way we were raised. And so if you really find yourself being triggered, as you said, by certain people's actions or responses or attitudes, then really it's about, okay, what does this bring out in me? Is it because I was treated that way as a child? Is it that I hear myself in that? Is it me that you're saying really you're acting like? And so that's something you really have got to see, because anger is a secondary emotion that is being triggered by something deeper, whether it be fear, whether it be guilt, whether it be whatever it is. That's the abuse maybe that you got to get to the root of it.
Yeah. The second question is one that I would find myself guilty of, because it's when we did How We Love, one of the traits that I favored, it wasn't my go-to, but was avoidance, okay? And it is, do you isolate or cut people out of your life when they disagree or hurt you, okay? And, it's like, if you know that you're going to bump heads with somebody, if you know you're going to be in conflict, then you know what? I'm not even going to go deal with that person. And there, by the way, there's a time for that. There's definitely a place for that. When we deal in situations of abuse and we don't see any reconciliation happening or any improvement towards health, then we want to always work towards protection of a person. But a lot of times it's our own little hang-ups that we just go, you know what, like this is where the phrase, you don't talk politics or religion with people. And so instead of not just talking politics or religion, no, I don't even want to see that person anymore.
We get stuck in our own narrative about religion or politics or gender or whatever. And then anybody that's not agreeing with us, we cut them out. And this is really happening with adult children. We could do a whole show on the relationship with a parent and an adult child, because we are growing a generation that we've taught them, by the way, that when you don't agree with somebody, you cut them out of your life. And so one of my favorite podcasters, authors, Steve Arterburn, speaks about this on one of his shows. And he was talking about, he's like, way to go, Mom. Way to go, Dad. You've just trained your child how to treat somebody in conflict and how they're going to treat you when they grow older. If you've done that with your parents or siblings or somebody you've cut out of your life, then you've just trained your child how to respond when someone doesn't agree with them. And is that what you want? Because that could be you on the other side of that cut off. And so this is something we really have to get some perspective on, is like, okay, I don't agree. Maybe they are even abusive. But what is a healthy, because you should never, ever use boundaries as a weapon for revenge or payback. That is never the goal of healthy boundaries. It's always restoration. It's always health for you. But man, if you're using it as a weapon to get back at that person for what they did to you, then that's the wrong motive.
Yeah. We need a whole new lesson in forgiveness when we're starting to go down that road. So I think that's a huge point. This next question is, do you spend more time admitting and owning your shortcomings or covering them up? You want to answer this one?
Actually, you did a little confession just today.
Who, me?
Yes.
What did I confess today?
I offered you a piece of candy, and you were like, nope, I've got to cut it off. I've got to get back. Like, you admitted the fact that you had
back on the wagon.
Now I'm the bad guy for offering you a mint after lunch.
Yeah, this is Satan right next to me here.
And so it's one of those things where we got to spend more time really looking at our own issues instead of pointing everybody else's out.
Yeah, and I think the dangerous part, especially concerning the topic that we're talking about, oftentimes we don't admit and own our shortcomings, but instead of covering them up, we actually spend more time putting a light on others, right? So this is that, well, I'm bad, but at least I'm not as bad as you.
Yeah, a little perspective there. Yeah.
And so that whole idea of am I quick to point out others or just to work to cover up? Now, kids will cover up their shortcomings or their trouble, so to speak, their actions, and they'll develop a whole pattern of lying. And so,
around their narrative.
Yeah, because listen, it's not worth being in trouble, and I want to continue to protect who I am. And so you have to really learn how to help your kids with this, and you can't. So the way that we help somebody is we can't attack them instantly. It is so much diplomacy in how we're going to help our kids or other people not feel like, you're going to attack them. And so you got to back off of sometimes pointing out all their shortcomings.
Okay, so I have a confession to make.
Uh-oh, man.
Actually, and I just confessed to you, and I'm confessing to our audience, that there was a little faux pas in our last round of T-shirts that we had printed. And we had gone through all kinds of proofing and, looking through them, and it looked great. And so we printed hundreds of them, and we gave them away to partners and clients and all that stuff. And so, so if you have a Rock Solid Family T-shirt, on the back there is a verse that comes from out of Matthew 7, 24. It's supposed to be 24. Okay, that talks about, being a wise and foolish builder, and that on this house we will build our house on a rock. Okay, and so I don't have the verse right in front of me, but the point is that the verse words were right, the verse address was wrong. So go on in your T-shirt on the back and look, and because it says Matthew 7:2, not Matthew 7:24.
So what does Matthew 7:2 say?
It's the point of this thing. And so if you by chance were one of those like, the Hutchinsons don't even know their Bible. They don't even know their Bible. And so if you would go look up Matthew 7:2, I find this so funny, and it just fits so perfectly with what we're talking about, because it says... I had a laugh when I caught it, and I caught it before you did, and I didn't even want to tell you because it was like hundreds and hundreds of shirts. I'm like, oh no. But it says in Matthew 7:2, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and the measure you use, it will be measured to you.
So keep your mouth shut. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. So
it would be so easy to read that, especially after we've proofed it all and done all that and paid the money and everything, and then look at that and just lose our mind.
Don't even know what happened either. Maybe it was a God thing that we were supposed to have.
Yeah, maybe we need to be reminded that we have to be careful with the judging. But I do think that's a great example of how we really just need to be careful. Yeah. It doesn't mean we can't see things that need to be corrected. Okay, so in other words, we print new shirts. It doesn't mean we're going to print them wrong and go, that's just the way it's. we do correct things, okay? Yeah. But how we handle a wrong is really, it needs to be done a whole lot better than it's being done in our society today.
So if you would go on to Matthew 7:3, it says, "Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? It says, 'You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.'" And man, that is, I need to be reminded of that daily. When I look at, like, our daughter forgot to put the ice cream away the other day again, and like it's melting all over the counter. And so, not that I've ever not done that before, and so it's really hard not to go in and jump down her throats. Like, no, I've got to be really careful with how I respond.
Yeah. It's just that idea that people are going to make mistakes, and do you want to be judged the way you are going to be judged, or the way you're judging? And I think we have to really be a little bit more considerate of that. I've worked with plenty of people before, and there's a group of people out there that are just very white and black. There's no gray area. And sometimes that makes it really simple. Like it's either yes right or no. There's nothing in the middle. But when you start doing relationship with people, if everything is black and white, and they will say, well, I'm just doing this because it's truth and it's justice, and I think we should live in justice. If you don't mix in some grace with that, you're going to find yourself on the short side, because no one has walked this earth with perfection except for Christ. Yeah. And so it's just, all right, we have to get off of our self-righteous high horse here and realize, hey, we all come up short at times, all right? Yep. Doesn't mean we're not going to strive to make it better. We are going to fix the T-shirts, okay? But we're not going to spend any time beating anyone up from the past.
And it does bring peace. It really does. When you kind of take yourself off the throne as being the judge and the jury, and you allow God to do what he does, you have a heart of peace. And I love this out of Proverbs 14:30. It says, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bone. So if you're always looking at someone who's doing something wrong, or, it's triggering something in you, like if this really is stirring up something in your heart and you're kind of feeling like we're stepping on your toes, get some help, because there is a peace that you can have in your heart. There is a freedom that you can experience when you let go of holding everyone hostage to your perspective and your narrative, as you said. And man, he just wants to create this new norm for you that is a life of that peace and that freedom and that joy that comes from him.
If there's anything that we could impart, if there's one word that is the game changer here, is understanding empathy. Actually, what empathy is. You will quickly fall out of your judgmental actions when you take the moment, you take the time to not sympathize, not feel bad that somebody had a rougher situation than you, but to just walk a little bit in their shoes, to see their perspective. And so empathy is really the key here. And we talk about that all the time. Like, when you are dealing with a spouse and you're in conflict with them, when you just listen. You just listen, and you hold back any judgment, and you look for clarity in the message. Yeah. All right. That in itself will just go miles and miles in terms of the two of you starting to learn to understand each other so much better.
I love that word. And I think it's an important word that we've got to teach our kids. We've got to strive for in our lives, in our relationships. Another word that we heard just recently, Hun, was contentment. And that is really seeing life, seeing your circumstances through God's perspective is really what brings us contentment. So that if even if things aren't going the way you prayed for or want or need, that you trust that God is still working. He hears you. And that when you can rest in that, when you can look at things through God's filter and God's ideas and perspective, that really does bring us contentment, and also kind of forces us to have empathy for other people.
Yeah, not only do I want God to continue the grace with me, but I want to start to practice seeing how God sees that person who's irritating me. Yes. Does God think that he's a jerk, like I think he's a jerk, you know, and chances are, no, God supplies that grace.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think those are great points, and that are all just grounded in understanding and perspective and learning to get open perspective.
Yeah.
If so somebody does offend you, somebody does hurt you, somebody does bother you. So how do you call them out? Or do you just walk over it and just avoid it like I would do? Okay? Right?
That's a great question. And this isn't even in our notes, hon, but you just made me think of this. I teach all the time the difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. Peacekeeper would say nothing, right? Don't rock the boat. Don't make waves. And so that just builds that resentment and that anger, okay? But if it is something that needs to be handled, okay, in a loving way, to speak the truth in love, to be the peacemaker, to be able to help bring about peace in a greater way down the road, it may be long term. But again, I really would be prayerful about, is this something that I need to handle? Is it in my lane? Am I part of the problem, or can I be part of the solution? And so I think there's a difference and there's different circumstances when you should be peacemaker.
Well, you based it, though, like the truth in love.
Yes.
Right? So at the end of the day, I need to honor and respect this person just as I want them to do to me.
Yes.
And so oftentimes we hide behind the truth with just direct honesty, right? You know, I'm honest to a fault.
Yeah,
You'll
I've heard that.
hear people say that, and it's like, that's just really a bad a wall to hide behind.
Yeah.
Well, take it or leave it. This is the way I am, and it's just, that's not how you would want to be handled if it's going to be hurtful.
So again, at the top of the show, we said, are you doing more reflecting or rebuking? And so I say you do more reflecting. Okay, what do I want to say? How do I want to handle this? What would be the right thing to do, instead of just shooting off all these rebukes and all this judgment? And so here's some steps that we want you to take for all of us, including myself, that we really need to work on in our perspective. And one is, admit to yourself that maybe you need to change a perspective. And if there's something that's really setting you off or triggering something, get some help. Okay, get some help. You've been too judgmental or condemning or not more reflecting on your own stuff. And then the next step, hon, is to tell somebody.
Tell somebody with the idea that you're admitting that there's a challenge here, okay?
Yes.
And so it's the idea that you're going to bring it up to the front, and you're recognizing that it is now a challenge in how you operate, okay? Yep. And with that, there are actually programs for this, like even like a Celebrate Recovery.
Yes.
It goes through 12 steps, and these steps are designed for you to actually kind of break things down and see how you've been operating and what's operating well and what's not operating well. And that's why it's broken down in these smaller incremental steps, so that you don't become, oftentimes people will jump steps and then they, because, I admitted that I was wrong on this. And then they drift back into it.
Yeah,
so
they get overwhelmed. It's like too much.
Yeah.
And if you've never heard of Celebrate Recovery, it's basically a Christ-centered 12-step program for anybody with hurts, habits, and hangups. And so sometimes our perspective is very skewed because of a hurt or a habit or a hang-up. And so you're going to have to, and this is the next step, give people permission to speak the truth in love, even if it hurts, okay? And again, not brutally honest, but gentle and loving, to speak the truth. We all need people in our lives that don't tell us what we want to hear, but what we need to hear. And so if you don't have those people in your life, you need to go out and seek them. And you're like, where do I begin? A church, a support recovery program. Those would be great places, or a professional counselor, pastor, mentor, somebody that you give permission to speak truth into your life.
The next step with that, so you're asking people to speak truth. That means and this is a practice as well, you have to practice learning how to listen. Okay.
How coachable are you?
Yeah. And I mean, that means I'm going to purely listen without my agenda running in the back of my head. Okay.
Yep.
Because as Linda's telling me something that I don't really want to hear because maybe, it offends me or whatever, my narrative is going right to defensive mode, and I'm coming up with the argument to spin back to her.
Yep.
And so teaching people how to listen, you would actually, in a situation like this, I would give Linda permission to speak to me. She would tell me what it is that she was challenged by or whatever, and I would then just seek clarity. So tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me
the follow-up question.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me how I can understand better versus, well, maybe you didn't understand me. Okay.
Yeah.
And so teaching yourself how to listen, this will go a long way as parents to kids. It'll even go farther, generationally speaking, if parents teach their kids this.
Yes.
Kids by their nature will jump to their defensive mode. Like as soon as you kind of attack your kid for leaving the refrigerator door open or whatever, chances are they're going to try to defend themselves. And so if you can teach your kid to just take a deep breath, calm down, and seek some clarity so that, one, we can get the refrigerator door closed, right? But two, they can learn from the process, all right? So teaching people and yourself how to listen and get clarity.
Yeah, so make a commitment today to do the work and open up your mind and your heart to what God is asking for you next. Maybe in this season of life or for the next season of life, like every single one of us, including us, can do steps to get better at this, okay? And so really ask God to really show you what areas of your life maybe is your perspective skewed, and is your mind and heart closed to what He is asking? Again, everything is filtered through God and His Word, okay? We're not asking you to jump on the bandwagon of somebody's perspective or narrative just because. I'm asking you to keep your mind and your heart open and continue to grow and really allow God and His Holy Spirit to guide and direct you into what it is He wants you to do and who He wants you to connect with and how He wants you to listen and minister to others.
As you said earlier, I just feel like we probably need to kind of end with this idea. So not everybody's Christian, right?
Right.
But us who are Christian, we have to believe that there is a base to work off of, a base of truth. And so it is the perspective of Christ and God's Word here that we want to use as our foundation of truth, okay? And now there's different arguments that could be had about the interpretation of different things, but even in Scripture, it boils it down so many different times, and the greatest of these is love, right? Like doing things in love. And so that whole idea of the most important perspective that you need to seek is the perspective of God.
Yeah. And, when we came to know Christ, it didn't happen from somebody beating their head over with God's Word and truth. It was from someone who walked alongside us in love and gently showed us the way and really modeled a life of humility and empathy and contentment and compassion and love that really won us over to the gospel. And so that's what we're saying. If we could shift our perspective and open up our minds and hearts to how we talk and how we relate and connect with people and what we do when it comes to people we don't agree with, man, I think we could become more effective disciples who make disciples.
Absolutely. All right. Yeah. So, hey, if any of this sparked your thought, or it sounds familiar in your marriage or your home or work relationships, we ask you to tune in to some of the things that we've suggested here, and maybe they can help. If it's a little bit deeper of that, or it's kind of messy and you don't quite know how to get through it, maybe it's deep in the home or the marriage, reach out to us, okay? I mean, like we said before, this is the kind of work that we help to go through, and more than anything, you'll find us as a mediator to see the different types of perspective, and that helps the conversation, the dialogue begin. So if we can help, reach out to us. Again, our number is 812-576-7625. We also would like to thank our sponsors, Maxwell Construction and Casey's Outdoor Solutions, for the support that they give us. I also want to say, do us a favor, give us these 5-star ratings and share the shows. I mean, oftentimes when you hear a show, I do this all the time with different podcasts. I'll hear it and I'll be like, oh man, I want to share this with this guy because I know he's kind of in this battle right now. So share the show. If it's not for you, maybe it's for someone else that we can help out.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening to Rock Solid Radio, building a stronger community, one family at a time. Make it a great day. Rock Solid Radio wants to thank Maxwell Construction, who has been our sponsor since the very beginning. For over 30 years, Maxwell has delivered the highest quality projects by holding to their core values of customer satisfaction, positive attitude, respect, and excellence. So if you have any kind of commercial construction need, give Maxwell Construction a call today at 812-537-2200.